Over the next week and a half, there seemed to be only two people in my life, Brenda and the little colored kid who liked Gauguin. Every morning before the library opened, the boy was waiting. Sometimes he seated himself on the lion's back, sometimes under his belly. Sometimes he just stood around throwing pebbles at his mane. Then he would come inside, tap around the main floor until Otto stared him up on tiptoes, and finally headed up the long marble stairs that led to Tahiti. He did not always stay till lunchtime, but one very hot day he was there when I arrived in the morning and went through the door behind me when I left at night. The next morning it was that he did not show up, and as though in his place a very old man appeared, white, smelling of lifesavers, his nose and jowls showing erupted veins beneath them.
"Could you tell me where I'd find the art section?"
"Stack 3, I said. In a few minutes he returned with a big brown-covered book in his hand. He placed it on my desk, withdrew his card from a long, moneyless billfold, and waited for me to stamp out the book. "Do you want to take this book out?" I said. He smiled. I took his card and jammed the metal edge into the machine, but I did not stamp down. "Just a minute," I said. I took a clipboard from under the desk and flipped through a few pages, upon which were games of Battleship and tic-tac-toe that I'd been playing through the week with myself. "I'm afraid there's a hold on this book."
"A what?"
"A hold. Someone's called up and asked that we hold it for them. Can I take your name and address and drop a card when it's free?" And so I was able, not without flushing once or twice, to get the book back in the stacks. When the colored kid showed up later in the day, it was just where he'd left it the afternoon before. As for Brenda, I saw her every evening, and when there was not a night game that kept Mr. Patimkin awake and in the TV room, or a Hadassah card party that sent Mrs. Patimkin out of the house and brought her in at unpredictable hours, we made love before the silent screen. One muggy, low-skied night, Brenda took me swimming at the club. We were the only ones in the pool, and all the chairs, the cabanas, the lights, the diving boards, the very water seemed to exist only for our pleasure. She wore a blue suit that looked purple in the lights, and down beneath the water it flashed sometimes green, sometimes black. Late in the evening, a breeze came up off the golf course, and we wrapped ourselves in one huge towel, pulled 2 chaiselongs together, and despite the bartender, who was doing considerable pacing back and forth by the bar window, which overlooked the pool, we rested side by side on the chairs. Finally, the bar light itself flipped off, and then, in a snap, the lights around the pool went down and out. My heart must have beat faster or something, for Brenda seemed to guess my sudden doubt. "We should go," I thought. She said, "That's okay." It was very dark. The sky was low and starless, and it took a while for me to see, once again, the diving board a shade lighter than the night, and to distinguish the water from the chairs that surrounded the far side of the pool. I pushed the straps of her bathing suit down, but she said no and rolled an inch away from me, and for the first time in the 2 weeks I'd known her, she asked me a question about me. "Where are your parents?" she said. "Tucson," I said. "Why?" "My mother asked me." I could see the lifeguard's chair now, white almost. "Why are you still here? Why aren't you with them?" she asked. "I'm not a child anymore, Brenda," I said more sharply than I'd intended. "I just can't go wherever my parents are." "But then why do you stay with your aunt and uncle?" "They're not my parents." "They're better?" "No, worse. I don't know why I stay with them." "Why?" she said. "Why don't I know? Why do you stay? You do know, don't you?" "My job, I suppose. It's convenient from there, and it's cheap, and it pleases my parents. My aunt's all right, really." "Do I really have to explain to your mother why I live where I do?" "It's not for my mother. I want to know. I wondered why you weren't with your parents, that's all." "Are you cold?" I asked. "No." Do you want to go home? No, not unless you do. Don't you feel well, Neil? I feel all right. And to let her know that I was still me, I held her to me, though that moment I was without desire. Neil? What? What about the library? Who wants to know that? My father, she laughed. And you? She did not answer a moment. And me, she said finally. Well, what about it? Do I like it? It's okay. I sold shoes once and liked the library better. After the Army, they tried me for a couple of months at Uncle Aaron's real estate company, Doris's father, and I liked the library better than that. How did you get a job there? I worked there for a little while when I was in college. Then, when I quit Uncle Aaron's, I don't know. What did you take in college? At Newark Colleges of Rutgers University, I majored in philosophy. I am 23 years old. Why do you sound nasty again? Do I? Yes. I didn't say I was sorry. Are you planning on making a career of the library? Bren, I'm not planning anything. I haven't planned a thing in 3 years, at least for the year I've been out of the Army. In the Army, I used to plan to go away weekends. I'm not a planner. After all the truth I'd suddenly given her, I shouldn't have ruined it for myself with that final lie. I added, I'm a liver. I'm a pancreas, she said. And she kissed the absurd game away. She wanted to be serious. Do you love me, Neil? I did not answer. I'll sleep with you whether you do or not, so tell me the truth. That was pretty crude. Don't be prissy, she said. No, I mean a crude thing to say about me. I don't understand, she said, and she didn't. And that she didn't pained me. I allowed myself the minor subterfuge, however, of forgiving Brenda her obtuseness. Do you? She said. No. I want you to. What about the library? What about it? She said. Was it obtuseness again? I thought not. And it wasn't, for Brenda said, when you love me, there'll be nothing to worry about. Then of course I'll love you, I smiled. I know you will, she said. Why don't you go in the water and I'll wait for you and close my eyes, and when you come back, you'll surprise me with a wet. Go ahead. You like games, don't you? Go ahead. I'll close my eyes. I walked down to the edge of the pool and dove in. The water felt colder than it had earlier, and when I broke through and was headed blindly down, I felt a touch of panic. At the top again, I started to swim the length of the pool, and then turned at the end and started back. But suddenly I was sure that when I left the water, Brenda would be gone. I'd be alone in this damn place. I started for the side and pulled myself up and ran to the chairs, and Brenda was there, and I kissed her. God, she shivered. You didn't stay long. I know. My turn, she said, and then she was up, and a second later I heard a little crack of water, and then nothing. Nothing for quite a while. Bren, I called softly. Are you all right? But no one answered. I found her glasses on the chair beside me and held them in my hands. Brenda? Nothing. Brenda! No fair calling, she said, and gave me her drenched self. Your turn, she said. This time I stayed below the water for a long while, and when I surfaced again, my lungs were ready to pop. I threw my head back for air, and above me saw the sky, low like a hand pushing down, and I began to swim as though to move out from under its pressure. I wanted to get back to Brenda, for I worried once again, and there was no evidence, was there, that if I stayed away too long, she would not be there when I returned. I wished that I had carried her glasses away with me, so she would have to wait for me to lead her back home. I was having crazy thoughts, I knew, and yet they did not seem uncalled for in the darkness and strangeness of that place. Oh, how I wanted to call out to her from the pool. But I knew she would not answer, and I forced myself to swim the length a third time and then a fourth. But midway through the fifth, I felt a weird fright again, had momentary thoughts of my own extinction, and that time when I came back, I held her tighter than either of us expected. Let go, she laughed. My turn, but Brenda. But Brenda was gone, and this time it seemed as though she'd never come back. I settled back and waited for the sun to dawn over the ninth hole, prayed it would, if only for the comfort of its light. And when Brenda finally returned to me, I would not let her go, and her cold wetness crept into me somehow and made me shiver. That's it, Brenda. Please, no more games, I said. And then when I spoke again, I held her so tightly I almost dug my body into hers. I love you, I said. I do. So the summer went on. I saw Brenda every evening. We went swimming, we went for walks, we went for rides up through the mountains so far and so long that by the time we started back, the fog had begun to emerge from the trees and push out into the road. And I would tighten my hands on the wheel, and Brenda would put on her glasses and watch the white line for me. And we would eat. A few nights after my discovery of the fruit refrigerator, Brenda led me to it herself. We would fill huge soup bowls with cherries, and in serving dishes for roast beef, we would heap slices of watermelon. Then we would go up and out the back door of the basement and onto the back lawn and sit under the sporting goods tree, the light from the TV room the only brightness we had out there. All we would hear for a while were just the two of us spitting pits. I wish they would just take root overnight, and in the morning there'd just be watermelons and cherries. If they took root in this yard, sweetie, they'd grow refrigerators and Westinghouse preferred. I'm not being nasty, I'd add quickly, and Brenda would laugh and say she felt like a green-gauge plum, and I would disappear down into the basement, and the cherry bowl would now be a green-gauge plum bowl, and then a nectarine bowl, and then a peach bowl, until, I have to admit it, I cracked my frail bowel and would have to spend the following night, sadly, on the wagon. And then, too, we went out for corned beef sandwiches, pizza, beer and shrimp, ice cream sodas, and hamburgers. We went to the Lions Club fair one night, and Brenda won a Lions Club ashtray by shooting 3 baskets in a row. And when Ron came home from Milwaukee, we went from time to time to see him play basketball in the semi-pro summer league. And it was those evenings that I felt a stranger with Brenda, for she knew all the players' names. And though for the most part they were gawky-limbed and dull, there was one named Luther Ferrari who was neither, and whom Brenda had dated for a whole year in high school. He was Ron's closest friend, and I remembered his name from the Newark News. He was one of the great Ferrari brothers, all-state, all of them in at least 2 sports. It was Ferrari who called Brenda Buck, a nickname which apparently went back to her ribbon-winning days. Like Ron, Ferrari was exceedingly polite, as though it were some affliction of those over 6'3". He was gentlemanly towards me and gentle towards Brenda, and after a while I balked when the suggestion was made that we go to see Ron play. And then one night we discovered that at 11 o'clock the cashier of the Hilltop Theater went home, and the manager disappeared into his office. And so that summer, we saw the last quarter of at least 15 movies. And then when we were driving home, driving Brenda home, that is, we would try to reconstruct the beginnings of the films. Our favorite last quarter of a movie was Ma and Pa Kettle in the City. Our favorite fruit, green-gauge plums. And our favorite, our only people, each other. Of course, we ran into others from time to time, some of Brenda's friends, and occasionally 1 or 2 of mine. One night in August, we even went to a bar out on Route 6 with Laura Simpson-Stolowich and her fiancé, but it was a dreary evening. Brenda and I seemed untrained in talking to others, and so we danced a great deal, which we realized was one thing we'd never done before. Laura's boyfriend drank Stingers pompously, and Simp, Brenda wanted me to call her Stolo, but I didn't, Simp drank a tepid combination of something like ginger ale and soda. Whenever we returned to the table, Simp would be talking about the dance and her fiancé about the film, until finally Brenda asked him which film, and then we danced till closing time. And when we went back to Brenda's, we filled a bowl with cherries, which we carried into the TV room and ate sloppily for a while. And later, on the sofa, we loved each other. And when I moved from the darkened room to the bathroom, I could always feel cherry pits against my bare soles. At home, undressing for the second time that night, I would find red marks on the undersides of my feet. And how did her parents take all of this? Mrs. Patimkin continued to smile at me, and Mr. Patimkin continued to think I ate like a bird. When invited to dinner, I would, for his benefit, eat twice what I wanted. But the truth seemed to be that after he'd characterized my appetite that first time, he never really bothered to look again. I might have eaten 10 times my normal amount, have finally killed myself with food. He would still have considered me not a man, but a sparrow. No one seemed distressed by my presence, though Julie had cooled considerably. Consequently, when Brenda suggested to her father that at the end of August I spend a week of my vacation at the Patimkin house, he pondered for a moment, decided on the 5-iron, made his approach shot, and said yes. And when she passed on to her mother the decision of Patimkin Sink, there wasn't much Mrs. Patimkin could do. So, through Brenda's craftiness, I was invited. On that Friday morning that was to be my last day of work, my Aunt Gladys saw me packing my bag, and she asked where I was going. I told her. She did not answer, and I thought I saw awe in those red-rimmed, hysterical eyes. I had come a long way since that day she'd said to me on the phone, "Fancy schmancy." "How long you going? I should know how to shop. I wouldn't buy too much. You'll leave me with a refrigerator full of milk. It'll go bad. It'll stink up the refrigerator." "A week," I said. "A week?" she said. "They got room for a week?" "And Gladys, they don't live over the store." "I lived over a store. I wasn't ashamed. Thank God, we always had a roof. We never went begging in the streets," she told me as I packed the Bermudas I'd just bought. "And your cousin Susan will put through college. Uncle Max should live and be well. We didn't send her away to camp for August. She doesn't have shoes when she wants them. Sweaters she doesn't have a drawer full." I didn't say anything, Aunt Gladys. "You don't get enough to eat here? You leave over sometimes. I show your Uncle Max your plate. It's a shame. A child in Europe could make a 4-course meal from what you leave over." "Aunt Gladys," I went over to her, "I get everything I want here. I'm just taking a vacation. Don't I deserve a vacation?" She held herself to me, and I could feel her trembling. "I told your mother I would take care of her Neil. She shouldn't worry. And now you go running?" I put my arms around her and kissed her on the top of her head. "Come on," I said. "You're being silly. I'm not running away. I'm just going away for a week on a vacation." "You'll leave their telephone number. God forbid you should get sick." "Okay. Milburn they live?" "Short Hills. I'll leave the number." "Since when do Jewish people live in Short Hills? They couldn't be real Jews, believe me." "They're real Jews," I said. "I'll see it, I'll believe it." She wiped her eyes with the corner of her apron just as I was zipping up the sides of the suitcase. "Don't close the bag yet. I'll make a little package with some fruit in it you'll take with you." "Okay, Aunt Gladys." And on the way to work that morning, I ate the orange and the 2 peaches that she'd put in a bag for me. A few hours later, Mr. Scapello informed me that when I returned from my vacation after Labor Day, I would be hoisted up onto Martha Winnie's stool. He himself, he said, had made the same move some 12 years ago, and so it appeared that if I could manage to maintain my balance, I might someday be Mr. Scapello. I would also get an $8 increase in salary, which was $5 more than the increase Mr. Scapello had received years before. He shook my hand and then started back up the long flight of marble stairs, his behind barging against his suit jacket like a hoop. No sooner had he left my side than I smelled spearmint and looked up to see the old man with veiny nose and jowls.
Hello, young man, he said pleasantly. Is the book back?
What book?
The Gauguin. I was shopping, and I thought I'd stop by to ask. I haven't gotten the card yet. It's 2 weeks already.
No, I said, and as I spoke, I saw that Mr. Scapello had stopped midway up the stairs and turned as though he'd forgotten to tell me something. Look, I said to the old man, it should be back any day. I said it with a finality that bordered on rudeness, and I alarmed myself, for suddenly I saw what would happen. The old man making a fuss, Mr. Scapello gliding down the stairs, Mr. Scapello scampering up to the stacks, Scapello scandalized, Scapello profuse, Scapello presiding at the ascension of John McKee to Miss Winnie's stool. I turned to the old man. Why don't you leave your phone number and I'll try to get a hold of it this afternoon? But my attempt at concern and courtesy came too late, and the man growled some words about public servants, a letter to the mayor, snotty kids, and left the library, thank God, only a second before Mr. Scapello returned to my desk to remind me that everyone was chipping in for a present for Miss Winnie, and that if I liked, I should leave a $50 on his desk during the day. After lunch, the colored kid came in. When he headed past the desk for the stairs, I called over to him. Come here, I said. Where are you going?
The heart section.
What book are you reading?
That Mr. Go-Again's book.
Look, man, I didn't do nothing wrong.
I didn't do no writing in anything. You could search me.
I know you didn't. Listen, if you like that book so much, why don't you please take it home? Do you have a library card?
No, sir, I didn't take nothing.
No, a library card is what we give to you so you can take books home. Then you won't have to come down here every day. Do you go to school?
Yes, sir. Miller Street School. But this here's summertime. It's okay I'm not in school. I ain't supposed to be in school.
I know. As long as you go to school, you can have a library card. You could take the book home.
What you keep telling me to take that book home for? At home, somebody destroy it.
You could hide it someplace, in a desk.
Man,
he said, squinting at me.
Why don't you want me to come round here?
I didn't say you shouldn't.
I likes to come here. I likes them stairs.
I like them too, I said, but the trouble is that someday somebody's going to take that book out. He smiled.
Don't you worry, he said to me. Ain't nobody done that yet.
And he tapped off to the stairs and stack 3. Did I perspire that day? It was the coolest of the summer, but when I left work in the evening, my shirt was sticking to my back. In the car, I opened my bag, and while the rush-hour traffic flowed down Washington Street, I huddled in the back and changed into a clean shirt so that when I reached Short Hills, I'd look as though I was deserving of an interlude in the suburbs. But driving up Central Avenue, I could not keep my mind on my vacation, or, for that matter, on my driving. To the distress of pedestrians and motorists, I ground gears, overshot crosswalks, hesitated at green and red lights alike. I kept thinking that while I was on vacation, that jowly bastard would return to the library, that the colored kid's book would disappear, that my new job would be taken away from me, that, in fact, my old job... But then why should I worry about all that? The library wasn't going to be my life.
Ron's getting married,
Julie screamed at me when I came through the door.
Ron's getting married.
Now? I said.
Labor Day. He's marrying Harriet. He's marrying Harriet.
She began to sing it like a jump rope song, nasal and rhythmic.
I'm going to be your sister-in-law.
Hi, Brenda said. I'm going to be a sister-in-law. So I hear. When did it happen? This afternoon, he told us. They spoke long distance for 40 minutes last night. She's flying here next week, and there's going to be a huge wedding. My parents are flittering all over the place. They've got to arrange everything in about a day or 2. And my father's taking Ron in the business. But he's going to have to start at $200 a week and then work himself up. That'll take till October. I thought he was going to be a gym teacher. He was. But now he has responsibilities. And at dinner, Ron expanded on the subject of responsibilities and the future.
"We're going to have a boy," he said, to his mother's delight. "And when he's about 6 months old, I'm going to sit him down with a basketball in front of him, and a football, and a baseball. And then, whichever one he reaches for, that's the one we're going to concentrate on."
"Suppose he doesn't reach for any of them," Brenda said. "Don't be funny, young lady," Mrs. Patimkin said.
"I'm going to be an ant,"
Julie sang, and she stuck her tongue out at Brenda.
"When's Harriet coming?"
Mr. Patimkin breathed through a mouthful of potatoes. "A week from yesterday."
"Can she sleep in my room?" Julie cried. "Can she?"
"No, the guest room," Mrs. Patimkin began, but then she remembered me, with a crushing side glance from those purple eyes, and said, "Of course." Well, I did eat like a bird. After dinner, my bag was carried, by me, up to the guest room, which was across from Ron's room and right down the hall from Brenda. Brenda came along to show me the way. "Let me see your bed, Brent." "Later," she said. "Can we? Up here?" "I think so," she said. "Ron sleeps like a log." "Can I stay the night?" "I don't know. I could get up early and come back in here. We'll set the alarm. It'll wake everybody up. I'll remember to get up. I can do it." "I better not stay up here with you too long," she said. "My mother'll have a fit. I think she's nervous about your being here." "Well, so am I. I hardly know them. Do you think I should really stay a whole week?" "A whole week? Once Harriet gets here, it'll be so chaotic you can probably stay 2 months." "You think so?" "Yes." "Do you want me to?" "Yes," she said, and went down the stairs so as to ease her mother's conscience. I unpacked my bag and dropped my clothes into a drawer that was empty except for a packet of dress shields and a high school yearbook. In the middle of my unpacking, Ron came clunking up the stairs. "Hi," he called into my room. "Congratulations," I called back. I should have realized that any word of ceremony would provoke a handshake from Ron. He interrupted whatever it was he was about to do in his room and came into mine. "Thanks," he pumped me. "Thanks." Then he sat down on my bed and watched me as I finished unpacking. I have one shirt with a Brooks Brothers label, and I let it linger on the bed a while. The arrows I heaped in the drawer. Ron sat there rubbing his forearm and grinning. After a while, I was thoroughly unsettled by the silence. "Well," I said, "that's something." He agreed. To what, I don't know. "How does it feel?" I asked after another longer silence. "Better. Ferrari smacked it under the boards." "Oh, good," I said. "How does getting married feel?" "Ah, okay, I guess." I leaned against the bureau and counted stitches in the carpet. Ron finally risked a journey into language. "Do you know anything about music?" he asked. "Something, yes." "You can listen to my phonograph if you want." "Thanks, Ron. I didn't know you were interested in music." "Sure. I got all the Andre Castellanos records ever made." "You like Mantovani? I got all of him, too." "I like semi-classical a lot. You can hear my Columbus record if you want." He dwindled off. Finally, he shook my hand and left. Downstairs, I could hear Julie singing, "I'm gonna be an ant," and Mrs. Patimkin saying to her, "No, honey, you're going to be a sister-in-law. Sing that, sweetheart." But Julie continued to sing, "I'm gonna be an ant." And then I heard Brenda's voice joining hers, singing, "We're gonna be an ant." And then Julie joined that, and finally Mrs. Patimkin called to Mr. Patimkin, "Will you make her stop encouraging her?" And soon the duet ended. And then I heard Mrs. Patimkin again. I couldn't make out the words, but Brenda answered her. Their voices grew louder. Finally, I could hear perfectly. "I need a house full of company at a time like this?" It was Mrs. Patimkin. "I asked you, Mother. You asked your father.
I'm the one you should have asked first. He doesn't know how much extra work this is for me. My God, Mother, you'd think we didn't have Carlotta and Jenny. Carlotta and Jenny can't do everything. This is not the Salvation Army. What the hell does that mean? Watch your tongue, young lady. That may be very well for your college friends. Oh, stop it, Mother. Don't raise your voice to me. When's the last time you lifted a finger to help around here? I am not a slave. I'm a daughter. You ought to learn what a day's work means. Why? Brenda said. Why? Because you're lazy, Mrs. Patimkin answered, and you think the world owes you a living. Who ever said that? You ought to earn some money and buy your own clothes. Why? Good God, Mother, Daddy could live off the stocks alone, for God's sake. What are you complaining about? When's the last time you washed the dishes? Jesus Christ, Brenda flared. Carlotta washes the dishes. Don't Jesus Christ me. Oh, Mother! And Brenda was crying. Why the hell are you like this? That's it, Mrs. Patimkin said. Cry in front of your company. My company? Brenda wept. Why don't you go yell at him, too? Why is everyone so nasty to me? From across the hall, I heard Andrei Kostelanetz let several thousand singing violins loose on Night and Day. Ron's door was open, and I saw he was stretched out, colossal, on his bed. He was singing along with a record. The words belonged to Night and Day, but I didn't recognize Ron's tune. In a minute, he picked up the phone and asked the operator for a Milwaukee number. While she connected him, he rolled over and turned up the volume on the record player so that it would carry the 900 miles west. I heard Julie downstairs. Ha ha, Brenda's crying! Ha ha, Brenda's crying! And then Brenda was running up the stairs. Your day'll come, you little bastard, she called. Brenda, Mrs. Patimkin called. Mommy, Julie cried. Brenda cursed at me. What's going on here? Mr. Patimkin shouted. You call me, Mrs. P? Carlotta shouted. And Ron in the other room said, Hello, Har, I told them. I sat down on my Brooks Brothers shirt and pronounced my own name out loud. God damn her, Brenda said to me as she paced up and down my room. Bren, do you think I should go? Shh! She went to the door of my room and listened. They're going visiting, thank God. Brenda, shh. They've gone. Julie, too? Yes, she said. Is Ron in his room? His door is closed. He went out. You can't hear anybody move around here. They all creep around in sneakers. Oh, Neil. Bren, I asked you, maybe I should just stay through tomorrow and then go. Oh, it isn't you she's angry about. I'm not helping any. It's Ron, really. That he's getting married just has her flipped. And me. Now with that goody-good Harriet around, she'll just forget I ever exist. Isn't that okay with you? She walked off to the window and looked outside. It was dark and cool. The trees rustled and flapped as though they were sheets that had been hung out to dry. Everything outside hinted at September, and for the first time I realized how close we were to Brenda's departure for school. Is it, Bren? But she was not listening to me. She walked across the room to a door at the far end of the room. She opened it. I thought that was a closet, I said. Come here. She held the door back, and we leaned into the darkness and could hear the strange wind hissing in the eaves of the house. What's in here? I said. Money. Brenda went into the room. When the puny 60-watt bulb was twisted on, I saw that the place was full of old furniture. 2 wing chairs with hair oil lines at the back, a sofa with a paunch in its middle, a bridge table, 2 bridge chairs with their stuffing showing, a mirror whose backing had peeled off, shadeless lamps, lampless shades, a coffee table with a cracked glass top, and a pile of rolled-up shades. What is this? I said. A storeroom. Our old furniture. How old? From Newark, she said.
Come here." She was on her hands and knees in front of the sofa and was holding up its paunch to peek beneath. "Brenda, what the hell are we doing here? You're getting filthy." "It's not here." "What?" "The money. I told you." I sat down on a wing chair, raising some dust. It had begun to rain outside, and we could smell the fall dampness coming through the vent that was outlined at the far end of the storeroom. Brenda got up from the floor and sat down on the sofa. Her knees and Bermudas were dirty, and when she pushed her hair back, she dirtied her forehead. There, among the disarrangement and dirt, I had the strange experience of seeing us, both of us, placed among disarrangement and dirt. We looked like a young couple who had just moved into a new apartment. We had suddenly taken stock of our furniture, finances, and future, and all we could feel any pleasure about was the clean smell of outside, which reminded us we were alive, but which, in a pinch, would not feed us. "What money?" I said again. "The $100 bills, from when I was a little girl." And she breathed deeply. "When I was little and we'd just moved from Newark, my father took me up here one day. He took me into this room and told me that if anything should ever happen to him, he wanted me to know where there was some money that I should have. He said it wasn't for anybody else but me, and that I should never tell anyone about it, not even Ron, or my mother." "How much was it?" $300 bills. I'd never seen them before. I was 9, around Julie's age. I don't think we'd been living here a month. I remember I used to come up here about once a week when no one was home but Carlotta and crawl under the sofa and make sure it was still here. And it always was. He never mentioned it once again. Never. Where is it? Maybe someone stole it. I don't know, Neil. I suppose he took it back. When it was gone, I said, "My God, didn't you tell him? Maybe Carlotta." "I never knew it was gone until just now. I guess I stopped looking at one time or another, and then I forgot about it, or just didn't think about it. I mean, I always had enough. I didn't need this. I guess one day he figured I wouldn't need it." Brenda paced up to the narrow, dust-covered window and drew her initials on it. "Why do you want it now?" I said. "I don't know," she said, and went over and twisted the bulb off. I didn't move from the chair, and Brenda, in her tight shorts and shirt, seemed naked standing there a few feet away. Then I saw her shoulders shaking. I wanted to find it and tear it up in little pieces and put the goddamn pieces in her purse. If it was there, I swear it, I would have done it. I wouldn't have let you, Bren. Wouldn't you have? No. Make love to me, Neil. Right now. Where? Do it. Here. On this cruddy sofa. And I obeyed her. The next morning, Brenda made breakfast for the two of us. Ron had gone off to his first day of work. I'd heard him singing in the shower only an hour after I'd returned to my own room. In fact, I had still been awake when the Chrysler had pulled out of the garage, carrying boss and son down to the Patimkin works in Newark. Mrs. Patimkin wasn't home either. She had taken her car and had gone off to the temple to talk to Rabbi Kranitz about the wedding. Julie was on the back lawn, playing at helping Carlotta hang the clothes. You know what I want to do this morning? Brenda said. We were eating a grapefruit, sharing it rather sloppily, for Brenda couldn't find a paring knife, and so we decided to peel it down like an orange and eat the segments separately. What? I said. Run, she said. Do you ever run? You mean on a track? God, yes. In high school, we had to run a mile every month, so we wouldn't be mama's boys. I think the bigger your lungs get, the more you're supposed to hate your mother. I want to run, she said, and I want you to run, okay? Oh, Brenda. But an hour later, after a breakfast that consisted of another grapefruit, which apparently is all a runner is supposed to eat in the morning, we had driven the Volkswagen over to the high school, behind which was a quarter-mile track. Some kids were playing with a dog out in the grassy center of the track, and at the far end, near the woods, a figure in white shorts with slits in the side and no shirt was twirling, and then flinging a shot put as far as he could. After it left his hand, he did a little eagle-eyed tap dance while he watched it arch and bend and land in the distance. "You know," Brenda said, "you look like me, except bigger." We were dressed similarly, sneakers, sweat socks, khaki Bermudas, and sweatshirts, but I had the feeling that Brenda was not talking about the accidents of our dress, if they were accidents. She meant, I was sure, that I was somehow beginning to look the way she wanted me to, like herself. "Let's see who's faster," she said, and then we started along the track.